Hey guys, today we're going to identify positive and negative effects the Spanish had on the New World. To get us started, we're going to look at a couple of terms. The first one is this word impact. So when you take a look at the picture, what is the meaning of the word impact? If you notice, the water droplet is hitting the puddle and it's allowing these ripples to come out of it. What could an impact mean? If you said to come into forcible contact with another object, you're correct. So, as we think about that with our Native Americans versus our European friends, they're going to forcibly come into contact with one another, whether it be just to bringing ideas together and the changes in ideas, or whether it's going to be they're going to war against each other. The two cultures are definitely going to come in contact. Okay, so impact can also mean to have a strong effect on something. So when we look at our two groups of people, they're greatly going to impact each other. The Native Americans are going to share things that the Europeans have never seen before, and the Europeans are going to bring things that the natives have never seen before, and they're going to have a strong impact on each other. The next term is domesticate. This is a word that you guys already know and are familiar with. So when you tame something, a plant or an animal that lives in the wild, and it's bred and learned to survive in a human environment, we call that domesticate. I want you to take a look at this picture and name 6 plants and animals that have been domesticated. I'll give you 10 seconds. If you said a horse, you are correct. If you said a rose is actually a flower that has been domesticated. They can actually grow those to be certain colors. If you said corn is a plant that was domesticated by the Native Americans from a wild grass. Goats, cows, chickens, those are all animals that have been domesticated by the Europeans that are going to be brought over to America. All right, now how about this? The Columbian Exchange. You learned a little bit about this in our last lesson. So what was the Columbian Exchange? A, when Columbus started trading natives for slaves. B, when plants, animals, diseases, and people began being traded between Europe and America. Or the exchange of money for goods from India and China. If you said B, you are correct. So as we take a look at this diagram, you're going to notice lots of different types of foods came from America and went over to Europe. So when Columbus came over, and he was not the only explorer, but he was the first one, so they're going to give him credit and call this the Columbian Exchange. But he's going to bring back all kinds of foods and animals that Europeans have never seen before. So things like tobacco. Remember in our book, Encounter, where they're smoking tobacco for the first time and they're coughing. They've never had pumpkins. They've never had squash or sweet potatoes. They've never tasted pineapple. Pineapple is going to come down here from the Caribbean. They've never tasted cocoa beans. So in Europe, they had never had any foods that were flavored with chocolate until Columbus brought that plant over. Potatoes, tomatoes, corn, vanilla was another flavoring that had never been added to foods in Europe until the Spanish explorers brought them back over. Now, what kinds of things came from Europe to the Native Americans? Well, coffee beans is going to be one. The natives had never tried coffee until they got it from Europe. Many of the citrus fruits, bananas, sugarcane, came from Europe and was actually brought over here to the Caribbean and grown down here in warm plantations in the Caribbean. Now, of course, they also are going to bring lots of things that are not good for the Native Americans because they don't have an immunity built up to them. And we learned about that in our video that we watched last time. So smallpox, influenza, typhus, measles, malaria, diphtheria, whooping cough, they just didn't have the medicines to be able to cure people of those diseases. So as we look at Spanish exploration, there are a few terms that I'm going to hit today. So the first one is colony. So a colony is a new blank that is established and governed by a country in another land. We're going to use the word settlement. So when the Europeans go over, they're going to decide to create colonies, groups of people that they're going to put in that land to live there and take over the land. The people that are going to come from Spain, the soldiers, are going to be called conquistadors, a Spanish soldier or explorer that is going to come over and take over the land. Now, the next part of our lesson is actually going to be a part where you're going to interact with it with your Google slide that looks like this called Spanish Explorers. So I'm going to ask you to pause the video and pull this up so you have your own copy to fill out as we go along. So we're going to start today with a lesson called The Europeans, Explorers, and Conquerors. Now, as I read this, I'm going to read this for those friends who need the help. If you don't want to read this or listen to me have it read to you, then you can turn the volume down. You can read the text for yourself. You can fill out the graphic organizer as you go along, and you can work at your own pace. But if you want to have it read to you, feel free to continue the video. All right, so the guiding question: what were the goals of early Spanish explorers? When Spanish explorers reached the Americas, natives told tales of gold, silver, and kingdoms wealthy beyond belief. The Spanish listened eagerly, and they traveled far and wide in search of these riches. These explorers, known as conquistadors, got encouragement from Spanish rulers. The rulers gave conquistadors the right to explore and create settlements in the Americas. In return, the conquistadors agreed to give Spain 1/5 of any treasure they found. This deal allowed Spanish rulers to explore the Americas with little risk. If a conquistador failed, he lost his own fortune, but if he succeeded, both he and Spain gained wealth and glory. So they are definitely going to be on the lookout for gold. Gold is going to be a big thing they're wanting to find in the New World. And each explorer is looking for glory and fame. They want a title. They want people to know who they are. They want people to create monuments in their honor. The conquest of Mexico and Peru. Although many of the tales of gold and riches proved to be false, some were true. Two wealthy empires, the Aztecs in what is now Mexico and Central America, and the Inca in South America, were among the richest prizes the conquistadors claimed. In 1519, Hernando Cortez landed on the east coast of present-day Mexico. Within 2 years, Cortez conquered the Aztec Empire that had ruled the region. Huge amounts of Aztec gold made Cortez and Spain wealthy. Cortez's success encouraged other conquistadors. 12 years after the Aztec conquest, Francisco Pizarro led an army into the Inca capital of Cuzco, Peru. The Spanish arrested and later executed the Inca ruler. Without their leader, the Inca were not able to fight effectively. Pizarro soon controlled most of the vast and wealthy Inca Empire. Now, at this point, we're going to pause, and I'm going to do one of these with you so you can kind of see what you're supposed to do on your graphic organizer. So for Cortez, we're looking for what area was it that he explored. So we're going to go back to our article, and it said, in 1519, Hernando Cortez landed on the east coast of present-day Mexico. So right over here, you can see there's Mexico. So we're going to go back to our graphic organizer, and we're going to type in east side of Mexico. My next question is, what did they hope to find? Now, I hope that you remember this. What were they really looking for? Okay. And it says huge amounts of Aztec gold made Cortez and Spain wealthy. And that was something they were looking for. So what did they hope to find? Gold. And what was a positive outcome from their exploration? It was they got huge amounts of Aztec gold and it made them wealthy. So it made he and Spain wealthy. Now, what was a negative outcome from their exploration? It might not specifically state it in the text, but I want you to think about what would have been a negative outcome of Cortez taking over the entire Aztec nation and taking all their gold. Well, to me, it would have been he conquered and killed the Aztecs. That's definitely a negative if you're an Aztec Native American. Okay. But then I want you to decide for yourself. So this is your opinion. Do you feel like he was more of a hero because he discovered this and got wealth for his nation and fame for himself, or was he more of a villain? Okay. In my point of view, I would say he was more of a villain. And when I have to explain why, I'm going to say they killed the native people through war and disease just to steal their gold. Could there have been a better way? No, probably not, because he was wanting gold this whole time. So to me, he's more of a villain, but this is your opinion. You can fill that out as you want to. Okay. Now, the next person I'm going to be looking for is Pizarro. And there was just an itty bitty piece about Pizarro right at the bottom of this, where it talked about how Pizarro led an army into the Inca capital of Cuzco, Peru. But I've already answered one of my questions, the area that he explored. So I'm going to give you a minute to pause the video and to add to your graphic organizer about Pizarro. Moving to the next section, why Spain won. The conquistadors' victories over the Aztec and Inca were quick and lasting. How did Cortez and Pizarro conquer such mighty empires with their small forces? Remember how large those Aztec and Inca empires were? They were thousands of people, and these guys came in and conquered them with just a few hundred soldiers. Well, here's why. First, the Spanish had weapons and animals the Aztec and Inca had never seen. The Spanish had guns and cannons. They rode horses and had huge, ferocious dogs. To the Native Americans, the Spanish seemed almost like gods. One Aztec recalled the fear that spread at the soldiers' approach. Their weapons clashed and rattled. They terrified everyone who saw them. Cortez received help from some native people who disliked their harsh rulers and were happy to help overthrow them. Finally, disease played a huge role. For many native groups, contact with the Europeans was deadly. With no immunity or resistance to the European diseases, the Aztec and the Inca suffered terrible epidemics. Illnesses weakened them in their struggle against the Spanish. Spain and North America. What did Spain hope to find in the Americas? Mexico and Peru were lands rich in silver and gold. Hoping to find similar wealth to the north, conquistadors explored the southeastern and southwestern parts of what is today the United States. Juan Ponce de Leon made the first Spanish landing on the east coast of present-day Florida in 1513. According to legend, Ponce de Leon was not looking only for gold. He was also hoping to find the legendary Fountain of Youth. This had been described by a historian of that time as a spring of running water of such marvelous virtue that drinking it makes old men young again. Ponce de Leon's exploration led to the first Spanish settlement in what is now the United States, a fort the Spanish built at St. Augustine, Florida, in 1565. Many people think of the Fountain of Youth as being this great big fountain that he was just going to randomly find in the woods that would make you young again. This might have been more of what he found, springs of water that came out of the ground. Now, did he ever actually find the Fountain of Youth? No, because it didn't exist. I'm going to ask you to stop the video and add on to your graphic organizer about Ponce de Leon. The Seven Cities of Gold. Still another conquistador searched for quick riches, and several lost their lives in the process. Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca was part of a Spanish expedition to Florida in 1528. After coming into conflict with Native Americans in Florida, the expedition sailed south toward Mexico in November, led by Panfilo de Narvaez. 3 of its 5 boats were lost in a storm. The 2 boats that made it through the storm became stuck on a beach on an island near present-day Texas. Within a few months, only a handful of the Spanish explorers were still alive. To survive among the Native Americans, de Vaca and an enslaved African named Estevanetco persuaded the Native Americans that they had healing powers. Cabeza de Vaca later wrote that their method of healing was to bless the sick, breathing upon them, and to recite Latin prayers. So basically, they tricked them into thinking that they were healers. In 1533, the Spaniards set off on a long trek across the Southwest. While traveling, they often heard stories about 7 rich cities in the region. When Cabeza de Vaca finally arrived in Mexico in 1536, he told eager listeners about the 7 cities of Cibola, 7 cities of gold. Stop here and take some notes on de Vaca. De Soto searches for gold. Excited by these stories, Hernando de Soto led an expedition to explore Florida and what is today the southeastern United States. For 3 years, the explorers traveled following stories of gold. Their encounters with the native people often turned violent. De Soto crossed the Mississippi River in 1541, describing it as swift and very deep. After traveling as far west as present-day Oklahoma, De Soto died of fever. His men buried him in the waters of the Mississippi, meaning they basically dumped his body in the water and left him to float downstream. If you take a look at the map, you can see this is kind of his path that he took up through America from Florida up into Georgia and some of those other states. Okay, stop and take notes on De Soto. All right, this is a different map that you can take a look at. It kind of shows you the states and where he traveled through. So he started out in Florida, and as he traveled around, he went through Georgia, he crossed through South Carolina, North Carolina, crossed the Appalachian Mountains, down into Alabama, and then all over Arkansas until he finally died, and they dumped him in the Mississippi River. Coronado takes up the search. Another conquistador who searched for the 7 cities of Cibola, gold, was Francisco Vasquez de Coronado. His travels took him through northern Mexico and present-day Arizona and New Mexico until his expedition reached a Zuni settlement in 1540. Finally convinced that there was no gold, members of the expedition traveled west to the Colorado River and east into what is now Kansas. They found no gold, only windswept plains and strange, shaggy cows, or buffalo. So stop and take your notes. Can you imagine what these explorers would have thought when they stepped out onto the Great Plains? Just vast regions of grass. And I'm sure the world looked huge compared to what they were used to seeing in Europe, where things were so crowded. All right, finally, let's see how we did. So, why did explorers want to settle in the New World? What were they really looking for? So, these are the Spanish explorers this time. So, they wanted to find, what was the first thing they were looking for? If you said gold, you are correct. And of course, along with gold, they wanted riches or wealth. Okay. So the explorers themselves, they wanted glory and fame. They wanted to claim that land for their country because the more land they had, the stronger their country was. And they also wanted to spread their religion. And we're going to talk more about religion in our next lesson. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.